I didn't raise my voice when I drew the line. I didn't threaten him. I didn't explain myself. I just stopped. And that was exactly what he didn't expect. From the outside, the moment looked ordinary. There was no dramatic tension in the room, no obvious sign that something irreversible was about to happen. If someone had walked in right then, they wouldn't have noticed anything unusual. But inside me, something had already settled. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was clarity. A calm, happy clarity that comes when you realize you've reached the edge of what you were willing to tolerate. If this story is touching you, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is there. For a long time, I thought I was being flexible. I believed I was choosing peace, choosing understanding, choosing to be the reasonable one. I told myself that not every boundary needed to be spoken, that some things were better handled quietly, and at first that felt true. I was good at adapting. I could read people quickly, sense what they needed, anticipate reactions before they happened. I knew when to push and when to step back. I learned how to soften my words, how to delay my needs, how to prioritize harmony over discomfort. People praised me for it. They said I was easy to talk to, easy to work with, easy to be around. What they didn't see was the cost. Every time I adjusted, something small slipped away from me. A preference I didn't voice, a limit I didn't enforce, a feeling I decided wasn't worth the trouble of explaining. None of it seemed significant on its own, but over time, those small moments accumulated into something heavier. And he noticed, not in a calculated way, not at first. He simply grew comfortable making decisions that included me without actually including me. Comfortable assuming my agreement before I'd even had the chance to consider it. He spoke with confidence. I responded with patience. He decided, I adapted. That dynamic settled into place so gradually that questioning it felt almost unnatural. Like I would be disrupting something that had already been agreed upon, even though it never had been. I told myself this was just how relationships worked, that compromise meant flexibility, that being understanding required sacrifice. But sacrifice without choice isn't compromise, it's erosion. The day I drew the line started like any other. The conversation was familiar, almost routine. He was explaining something he had already decided, something that would affect both of us, but he spoke as if my role was simply to accept it. I listened. I always did. As he talked, I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. The quiet discomfort I'd learned to ignore. The subtle sense that I was being moved into a position I hadn't chosen. He finished speaking and paused, waiting. That pause carried an expectation. The same one it always did. Agreement. For a brief moment, I almost gave it to him. Old habits are persuasive. I could already hear myself saying, it's fine, even though it wasn't. I could feel the reflex to smooth things over rising automatically. But then a thought cut through that instinct, sharp and undeniable. If I don't stop this now, it will keep happening. Not just this decision, not just this conversation. Everything that followed. That realization landed heavier than anything he had said. I suddenly understood that silence wasn't neutral. It wasn't passive. It wasn't harmless. It was permission. And I was tired of giving it. I didn't interrupt him. I waited until the pause widened, until the moment where my agreement was supposed to land. And then I said it. I'm not okay with that. The words felt steady as they left my mouth. Not rehearsed, not emotional. Just true. He blinked, surprised. For a second, he smiled slightly, like he thought I was joking or testing him. That's already decided, he said casually. It's not really up for discussion. That was the moment everything crystallized. I didn't feel small. I didn't feel intimidated. I felt still. It is, I replied. Because I won't accept it, I didn't explain why. I didn't list reasons. I didn't soften the statement. I drew the line exactly where I stood. The shift in the room was immediate. His expression changed, not dramatically, but noticeably. Confusion flickered first, followed by irritation masked as patience. He wasn't used to this version of me, the one who didn't over-explain, the one who didn't retreat. He tried to regain control by reframing the conversation, by minimizing what I'd said, by suggesting I was overthinking things, being difficult, making something simple unnecessarily complicated. Normally, that would have worked. But this time, I stayed where I was. "I'm not changing my mind," I said. That sentence didn't invite negotiation. It closed the door. I could see him recalculating in real time, searching for the familiar signals, the hesitation, the doubt, the urge to justify myself. Those signals had always guided him before. They weren't there anymore. What he didn't expect was my silence after that. Not the old silence, the kind that came from fear or avoidance. The silence was deliberate, grounded, final. When someone is used to you explaining yourself, your refusal to do so feels like resistance. He tried again later, approaching from a different angle. His tone softened. He framed it as concern, as practicality, as something that would benefit everyone involved. I listened carefully, and when he finished, I said the same thing. No, that word didn't just reject the decision. It rejected the dynamic. The conversation ended without resolution, no agreement, no dramatic fallout, just an uneasy quiet that lingered after we went our separate ways. When I was alone later that day, everything I had been holding back finally surfaced. My heart raced, my thoughts spiraled. Doubt crept in fast. Had I been too firm, too abrupt? Had I created consequences I wasn't prepared for? These questions felt familiar. They were the same ones that had kept me quiet for so long. But beneath the anxiety, there was something else. Stability. For the first time, I hadn't crossed my own boundary to keep someone else comfortable. I hadn't twisted myself into agreement just to avoid tension. I had stayed aligned with myself. The days that followed weren't easy. Drawing a line doesn't make it disappear, it makes it visible. And once it's visible, people will test it. He tested it subtly at first, small comments, casual suggestions, attempts to slide things back to where they used to be. Each time I felt the familiar pull to explain myself, to justify my position, to make things smoother, and each time I resisted. I've already answered that. That doesn't work for me. I'm not discussing this again. No anger, no raised voice, just consistency. That consistency was harder than speaking up the first time. I learned something important during that period. People don't react strongly when a boundary is unfair. They react when it disrupts what they were benefiting from. My silence had been convenient. My flexibility had been useful. My willingness to adjust had made things easy. And now it didn't. What surprised me most wasn't his reaction, it was mine. I didn't feel guilty the way I used to. I didn't feel responsible for managing his discomfort. I realized that discomfort wasn't a sign I had done something wrong. It was a sign that something had changed. And it had. Drawing the line didn't make me aggressive. It didn't make me cold. It didn't make me difficult. It made me clear. Clear about what I would accept. Clear about what I wouldn't. Clear about where I ended and others began. That clarity started to show up everywhere. In conversations where I no longer over-explained. In decisions where I paused before agreeing instead of saying yes automatically. In the way I spoke slower, stood steadier, took up the space I was already occupying. I realized how much energy I had been spending anticipating reactions, managing expectations, cushioning discomfort that wasn't mine to carry. Without that weight, I felt lighter. The line I drew that day wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with ultimatums or speeches. It was quiet, firm, and unmoving. And because of that, it held. He didn't expect it. Not because it was aggressive, but because it was final. I understood then that boundaries don't need volume to be effective. They don't need explanations to be valid. They don't need permission to exist. They only need consistency. If you're rewatching this and you're standing near a line you've been afraid to draw, know this: the fear isn't a sign you're wrong. It is a sign you're rechanging something that once benefited others more than it benefited you. The moment I drew the line didn't make me fearless, it made me solid. And that changed everything.